your colleagues about recording. You know, we talked about the different recording techniques. You demonstrated the sort of recording that you do out in Egypt. And I think that's where the value lies. You know, we need to ensure that we've got good records of buildings, regardless of status, regardless of sort of listed status, that sort of thing. The average terraced house, for instance, you know, they're getting knocked down to sort of make way for highways in certain areas of the country. And I think so long as we can ensure that there's something like a photograph, that helps in, you know, the recording side of things.
I'd just like to add that I think one reason that a lot of people voted for the energy simulation monitoring and the refurbishment and retrofit is that it's just such a big elephant in the room. If we don't tackle it one way, we're already on a juggernaut where green deals and single viewpoint policies which conflict with preservation of heritage are going to take over. The heritage is at risk just simply because of these single-minded policies that are trying to solve the issues of climate change and the challenges of adaptation.
I think that there's a natural human tendency to categorise. So what we do is we put things into pigeonholes. And I think what we're describing here is actually a continuum of activity and infrastructure from new build through to extremely important and historic heritage sites. So there are a lot of instances where BIM, particularly the higher levels of BIM, come into the room. I'm very impressed with Sutter Health in the States. A joint, one of our sister organisations, LCI in the US, who work around a lot longer than us, have Sutter Health as one of their members. And because of the Obamacare programme, there's a huge upsurge in the construction of new hospitals in America. However, Sutter Health have invested, I understand, to do a full BIM survey of all the existing infrastructure they own, because they see the clear benefit of being able to manage infrastructure using a BIM model, either because they're going to remodel it, they're going to renew it in some way, or even demolish it at some point. So I can understand, they've obviously passed the Rubicon in terms of understanding the benefits. It's a shame that many more do it already, and got to that point as well. And the final point is that there's a lot of historic structures in the nuclear industry. I spent 15 years with BNFL at Sellafield that maybe 20 or 24 years ago, 25 years ago, we did a major survey at Sellafield site with Atkins because we did not have the data about the structures on the site. Now we're in a much better position. But nuclear projects definitely should have them at very high levels. It makes sense now to do that for all sorts of reasons. Yeah.
Thank you, Derek. Shall we move on to the next question, please? Yes, let's start voting, please.
Can you define, I'm struggling with this question actually. Okay. I think maybe others might be as well. Are you saying, what do you mean by attain level 2 BIM?
Achieve, you know, so then come to...
Just the whole of the
highway sector, just highway.
All, including local authorities, and they'd all be up to level 2.
I think highway sector is, Highways England.
Local authorities and... Because that's about...
No.
Yeah, okay.
Do you think? It's inner city roads as well.
Okay. Good.
Just wait, I think. Is the question clear or no? Not really. Okay, let me correct the question in a way. So, for example, we were asking the same question about 10 years ago for the building sector. Where do you think we can achieve level 2 BIM? We were not calling it level 2 BIM, the collaboration, enabling collaboration, information sharing, exchange between these two different disciplines. Okay, so I'm just linking back to the initial question. So both for highway and heritage, we actually think that the BIMs actually start creeping, being implemented. We see some tiny minor elements of it, from the practice or best practice. So according to you, for example, in terms of highway, I mean, my understanding, I think, if you think that Zishan, including local authorities, but I was looking at from Highways England point of view. Highways England, for example, looking after the motorways, yes. So, from that point of view, I was not actually thinking the local authorities' inner city roads, but just to be clear, the Highways England point of view, for example, so level 2 BIM, for example, when Highways England, for example, design and building motorways, and they want to use BIM and they want to actually interact with some other, stakeholder in the process. So, and they are actually using BIM both sides. So, when do you think that can happen in the future? So, how long time frame is needed that can possibly happen? Huh? Okay, let's do revoting. Can we do revoting?
So can I just summarise? So rather than what we think they might do, it's what we think they might do. Rather than what we think they'll do, it's what we think they can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. True. Thank you.
Okay, have you voted now? Have you voted? Okay.
So I'm closing the poll.
Oh, that's optimistic, actually, 5 to 8 years. Most of the audience thinks that's 5 to 8 years for highways, for highway sector.
If you want to do it, then yes.
Any views?
I'm intrigued because Yusuf referred about 10 years ago to discussions he was having about the impossibility of BIM at all in construction. And I think somehow you were oversimplifying that to assuming we now have BIM of some sort in construction. I think we have BIM in some prototype areas in construction and some pilots, and we really don't have it effectively at all.
That's a provocation. Okay, any other views?
It will be probably happening in pilot projects. I think they would be super high specified, which would be used even European Union wide or worldwide or whatever. This case studies basically. But I think the majority itself would need to. I mean, you always have to look at the normal worker who is 20 years of experience in doing what he's doing. Getting his transition into digital age.
So we should start with education.
Yeah, I think, sorry. I think that's the majority part. So I'm going to talk about this later on today as well. So I think there is a tremendous interest in having BIM, but the question is how to get there. And there's a pretty interesting approach there actually in Switzerland. So they have formed a community for moving BIM forward. And in the first place, there was education was a fundamental pillar, because you cannot have BIM without, number one, having new students excited for a new technology, and having also workers in industry having the education to get this forward.
Also before the education process to match the process of BIM, because actually the design process is totally different from applying BIM. Because having a school is actually totally different from
yeah, we can take this later on. I think actually that the education, that there is a potential that the education itself changes due to BIM. So we are seeing right now that architects, civil engineers, and MEP technicians are working together on the same project that never happened except a couple of 100 years ago. Sorry.
Personally, I think the emphasis we have heard so far on BIM is the technology. I mean, the technology is not the main point. I think the collaboration. I think this is probably what could be implemented. Probably within the shorter time scale. Because if you manage to get people from bringing on their own expertise, their own skills, knowledge to bear upon key decisions, earlier on the process, as I think one of the speakers demonstrated this morning, I think that would be the major the major contribution. I think in terms of technology, I'm personally convinced that eventually it will change completely. You know, I mean, if you look at the historical development of the technology, it has been developed for the retail sector and so on. So we are just borrowing some tools, and we are expecting them. I mean, a few years ago, most tools didn't talk to each other, and still the case in most cases. You know, so all of a sudden we are talking already about BIM level 3, when people haven't really understood what is BIM level 1. So I think I mean, I'm convinced that we are expecting too much from the technology, and I think what we need to change first is the culture. You know, people talking to each other, and I think that's what is not happening yet. You know, I mean, if we're honest, I mean, all the projects that are happening in the UK, which I'm aware of, I mean, people are talking about using BIM, but most of the time they are fudging it. I mean, if you look at the costing, the latest reports, most of it, the information is still printed in a 2D plan, and all the costing is done the traditional way. You know, when it comes to serious business, it's still done the old way.
I was tossing up the other day in my career how much money I've spent on behalf of clients in major projects, the railways, nuclear and roads. It's about £3.5 billion. And every single time a project has gone wrong, sadly I've had a few career-limited moments where they've gone badly wrong, it's because of people, not because of the equipment. We've had the best planning systems, P6 for instance, P4, P5 in the old days, etc. But one thing that goes wrong is a lack of collaboration. So the comments very, very good. And the final point for me is, this is like a war on waste. This is not, you don't fight, I mean, maybe a very dramatic way of putting it, you don't fight a war with one front, you have a multiple set of fronts. BIM is a hugely powerful technology, it's going to do lots of things for us. Augmented reality, but actually, one of the things that we found in HeritageBIM was that the best things to do are things that people interact with. Visual management, Algan has been working on for the last few years, where you put things on the wall and make displays. You don't just sit at a computer screen. It's one of the sad facts of today's society that a lot of young children spend an awful lot of time at computer screens, maybe missing out on social interaction. The essence of engineering and construction is social interaction. So if BIM ends up being us all looking into the computer screens, we're going to be in a very bad place, quite frankly. Because the way we get things built, make things happen, is interaction, talk to each other, human beings. Yeah? So it's one aspect of a broad front of activity. And I would call it BIM.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, let's move on. Next question, please. So, you know, now we are actually asking the same question basically for heritage sector now. So can you please cast the vote, you know, for heritage sector? So do you think, you know, for level 2, what sort of time frame you think is needed for level 2?
Are you defining the heritage sector as just the 2% that John Edwards referred to?
No, the whole.
In which case?
John Edwards is actually one of the pioneering person, you know, trying to implement and use it. So I'm not asking for example, when John Edwards actually implemented BIM at level 2 in the future. So for the whole, you know, sector, it's more comprehensive, broader than. Is the sector the listed buildings and the ancient monuments, or is it the whole of the heritage sector? Building heritage. 2% of our building stock is listed or ancient monuments. 20% plus is heritage, pre-1919. I mean, you know, what we meant here, you know, for the heritage sector. So because we try to adopt BIM for the buildings that is actually in use. So we want to actually, you know, make use of those existing heritage buildings. You know, in use and in terms of its, you know, maintenance and energy efficiency and the well-being and comfort. So, you know, for example, monuments. I mean, okay, I can't actually make sense. Why do we have to do a BIM model for monuments? You know, so at the end, BIM is actually about people, process, and, you know, technology. So monuments, okay, It could be you can have a virtual reality model, and then you can actually have a virtual museum. You can have the electronic, the version of it and for recording, but at the end it's not going to be used by people to live in. So we are actually targeting heritage assets that is going to, or that are actually in use, or that are planned to be in use, like the examples Professor Sohera was actually showing. Those buildings, for example, under regeneration, and that will actually reuse and improve the performance of those buildings, from an energy efficiency and health and well-being point of view.
Okay. Yes, would you like to refine your question then as either pre-First World War or pre-Second World War?
No, including both. So there's no time.
Pre-Second World War.
Yeah. Okay, let's start. Let's cast the water, please.
Shouldn't you tell us who's paying for it?
Sorry?
Who's going to pay for it is the only question of that.
I'm sorry, we are not going to pay to answer the questions. If you, I don't know, should I say, if you don't want to answer, it's free. You are free.
No.
That's a different question. Yeah.
That's a very good question.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question. Was it a question? I thought it was a joke.
No.
Sorry.
It was a question. Who is going to pay for the heritage sector use of anything that costs real money to the real people, but other than the politician?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the politicians, the government is actually one of the key drivers, to use BIM. And one of the, for example, the UK government, maybe I shouldn't answer the question. Anyone would like to answer the question? Yeah.
The question is, I think, how to be smart about it. Is what kind of benefits does it, I think it circles into the questions which have been before quite a bit. But the Smithsonian, for example, has digitalized their whole museum, basically, so all artifacts which they have, because most of them they cannot display because they have so many artifacts and they don't have so much display space. So basically they digitalized everything and openly sourced it so you can print it out at home. So what that actually is a really big marketing activity. So you can actually print, whatever is in the Smithsonian, and then you can go to the Smithsonian and visit it really there. So I think, we kind of have to think more smart and more broader about this. So, how additional benefits can this digitalization bring? Because it's a huge possibility to really give people access. So the same with the internet, right? So the internet itself gives so many people access to knowledge, so YouTube or Wikipedia or whatever. So if we kind of spin it around, I think there's a huge potential.
I think that's a really good question, because one of the speakers previously said that we're struggling just to maintain the heritage stock, whether it's 20% or 2%. Because if you think that the Chancellor gave his budget today, I don't know the details of it, that politicians have to make quite difficult decisions about where money goes. Does it go into the NHS? Does it go into international development? Does it go to heritage? And heritage, I guess, comes quite low down the list, and it's higher up in this country than most, maybe. So consequently, they're struggling to pay for it. So unless they make a really good benefits case, they're going to struggle, I suspect, to justify it. Now, a lot of the speakers previously have been kind of saying that, haven't you? It's a kind of message.
I think I'd agree wholeheartedly with that gentleman back there. At the end of the day, it comes down to money. But I was thinking, there was maybe you needed another button to say it will never achieve that. I don't want to sort of go away sort of leaving a sort of very pessimistic note, but the reality is there's a lot of uncertainty, confusion about what BIM is and how it can be used within the heritage sector, which buildings it applies to. And I think until it gets down to the level of, if you buy a house from an estate agent, you on the listing, you tend to get an energy efficiency of the building. If you go on the website, you tend to see 360-degree panoramic images. Those things are sort of now standard practice for buying a property. I can see if BIM was to actually become that sort of a level of information then it might achieve level 2 in a much sort of quicker period. And I think that's where the automated tools that your colleague was talking about earlier that will maybe make the generation of very basic BIM data suitable for the likes of the sort of the terraced house in Nelson, which has been sort of a big project for English heritage. I think if we don't achieve that, then I think it's highly unlikely over 10 years at least.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much. Shadow? Okay, so what do you think is the main barrier for level 2 BIM implementation for highway sector? Now we need to justify in a way, so if you say, for example, sector more than 10 years it needs, so and then now we have to say what are the main problems and if they will take such a long time. Okay, can you cast the vote please now?
Okay, so just going for the answers. The first one is technology-related issues. If you think it's the technology which is the main barrier, or the human, as we were discussing before, is it issues related to collaboration and training, or is it the very much the structure, the fragmented nature of our sector where we work in different layers? Is this the biggest barrier, or lack of evidence for the benefits of level 2 BIM, so lack of clear understanding, clear return on investment frameworks, or is it to do with the better standardization, or lack of external drivers?
I think we will just wait for the questions, but yeah, if you want to. I think we can ask it.
Right, so I'm closing the poll. So it backs up the earlier discussion on human-related issues. Any comments from the panel?
It's interesting that B's come out so high because the highway sector is fully funded, virtually, by government, and government mandated reducing So we'll all be doing it. My comments about the non-strategic network, which is a local authorities in England, can't speak for Scotland and Northern Ireland, is it probably the larger projects, I don't know for sure, but for instance the South Manchester Airport Relief Road, for instance, might be a BIM model, for all I know, we might be doing it. One of the things that people get confused about is a fairly arbitrary split between the strategic network and the local authority. Local authorities have a much larger length of network, but they take less of the heavy goods traffic and vehicle movements. But they do have some very significant trunk roads, for instance, and bridges as well. So the government are effectively mandating level 2. So to some extent, it's going to happen on all new projects, I suspect. Otherwise, they'll be getting their fingers wrapped by government, probably financially, I suspect.
Thanks. Just in response to that, I recently interviewed for Bolger Beatty, and they, for a highways job, and they weren't interested at all in BIM, and seemed to think that it was not going to affect them at all.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so maybe I can add on that point as well, or I can. So yeah, it's actually a problem of large companies. So you have so I come myself from a very large construction company, and I was in the spearhead department, which was the BIM task group basically. and we were going crazy on all the projects basically. And there were on the other end people who were hand drafting and Excel and whatever, when we were automating basically until facility management, everything. So within large companies, even in Deutsche Bahn, for example, which is the largest employer in Germany, I've been traveling. Back in the day, they used to go car sharing, and I was driving with this very, very important guy from Deutsche Bahn. And he's like, you know, this is going to take forever till it's come through because it's such a large company, right? So there's always like very fast developments and very slow developments. It takes, as I said, it's a human pandemic.
Yeah, one of the things I found when we did the work with Lean down the supply chain was that, a bit like Kieran saying, large companies like Balfour Beatty aren't homogeneous in terms of their thought process. If I spoke to the MD of Balfour Beatty, you'd be 100% behind BIM. It'd be quite dissonant the things you heard locally, because I'm sure every major contractor is going up to the Cabinet Office or the Francis Maud or whoever, BIS who've mandated this, and they're saying they're doing it. They'll only do it if the client pays, and effectively government have said that. By mandating it, they'll build it into the cost. And one of the things we've not talked very much about, one of the speakers did talk about a protocol, a contractual protocol, that contracts are quite important, because they work to contracts. If the contract says BIM, you'll get BIM, but you'll pay for it. Yeah. So I think maybe you just happen to come across somebody who wasn't talking the party line, right? Well, I'm maybe making an excuse for it. If it was Skanska or Costain, you wouldn't be saying that. I can assure you, certainly in the housing sector.
So we will repeat the same question for the heritage sector.
I work for conservation architect practice, and we're a very, very small company, and one of the main things about this kind of transition to BIM is that the two directors are very up for moving on to BIM, but because we've got so much work on, it takes so much time. Well, they think it takes so much time to kind of make that transition from the way that everybody's used to working to this new way of working, of new technology. And when do you actually do that? When do you find time to do that? And as well with the funding, I think it'd be really, really useful to have that BIM information there about the heritage buildings, with knowing a record of when it was last repaired. I know you have certain reports like quinquennial inspections you do every 5 years, which you've got that report of, okay, well you've had a bit of the roof redone, but sometimes that record's just not there, and you go onto the building and it's not until you uncover the structure and you're like, oh, this has already been done, or there's a load of dry rot or something, when you've already applied for HLF, and all this information, it's so much unknown information that you can't predict at that time, which I think an element of BIM would be useful, but who's going to fund it? Where do you start? It's like, show me a starting point and I'll do it, but until then, it's really difficult to say to the practices that as a young professional, how do I say to somebody who's been in the industry for the last 30, 40 years saying, right, this is what we need to do, this is your practice, but we need to put this in place, this in place, this in place, because it's going to help the future of your business. They're just going to go, well, we've been doing all right so far. And you've got to be able to prove an argument to people and say, no, because these are the issues. So how do we move forward? And I think it's just really difficult to prove an argument when all they're going to say to us is, well, where are we going to get the money to do this? So that's the biggest issue for me coming into the industry. I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to be positive about it, but there's so many things coming up, and hopefully someone can give me some answers.
I think it must be a governmental issue with policies, just to make everyone list his building in a building information modeling, so we can have access to such building anytime through governmental. And also it should be interactive, so we can change the model with the change of circumstances around it. So we have like a database for the heritage that what we hoping to have. And I think it can be happened individually or through funding. It should be laws and policies and regulations for each country to have a maintenance.
Just as an analogy, I will share with you an experience I had a long time. I used to train people in AutoCAD, long time ago. And I remember once I had an architect who came to train in AutoCAD. He was of a certain age, put it this way. And he had a mouse. He never used the computer, basically. He had a mouse in his hand, and he was very frustrated that the computer was not doing what he wanted to do. And I mean, I asked him, I said, if you hate computers that much, why are you doing this course? And his answer is, I don't have a choice. If I don't use the computer, if I don't use AutoCAD, I don't have a job. And at that particular time, clients identified that CAD saves them money, because if either through perception or through reality, they thought that if somebody is doing a design through a drawing board, it will cost much more than doing it through AutoCAD, because if they ask for changes, it's either for free or very cheap to make the changes.
So in CAD and all the rest of it. And my experience over time was that it's possible for people to overcome enormous technical difficulties with superhuman effort for a period, and then the easy and the lazy way take over. So we have to have aspects of this that are easier to do and lazier to do than anything else. It's got to be easier to do this than to do something worse, and we certainly don't have that with the technology and the lack of intuition in the interfaces that we currently have. All of those are barriers, not opportunities.
Right, if I could just go back to your question, if I can remember what you were saying. First of all, I think it's good that you've actually got senior managers that are seeing the benefits or the potential benefits of BIM. I can actually put you in touch with loads of other companies who are burying their heads in the sand and they want BIM to go away very, very quickly. So I think that's a positive thing. Your scenario, it sort of mirrors what I gave English Heritage when I came back from the conference in America saying we need to think about BIM. We've had the benefit of 7 or 8 years sort of research into it, and I don't think I can actually give you a document that will say, here, this is what you do. Go and present it to your senior managers, because I think I actually pressed the benefits button on the screen there, the sort of the lack of benefits that are out there. I've said it before and I'll say it again, we need more sort of positive examples of that. In terms of English Heritage, they already have an asset management system that gives them all the tools that they currently need to maintain and manage their estate. They're not burying their heads in the sand about BIM, they see the benefits of it as and when it is useful on a project. But a final suggestion is we've got this BIM for Conservation working group, which has been set up and it's chaired by Ingval Maxwell, who's the chairman of Kotak, I think, as well. I would strongly suggest that I'll give you his email address afterwards, but you ought to actually raise that question to him, if you can try and remember the wording that you used, because I think that's a very, very important question and scenario that we all in the industry need to give thought to.
Can I start?
be a bit sort of maybe controversial here, but BIM is a very powerful tool, very good. We can make a step change in the construction industry just by deploying some very simple tools and techniques. 5 S's, standardizing, sorting, sifting. We've got a number of case studies now, many case studies, big step changes, visual management, simple last planner, simple problem solving, plan, do, check, act, simple Lean Sigma, if you can do it that way. So, in fact, a small practice, and I feel for your two partners, because they're in an environment where they probably feel compelled to keep, we're obviously forward thinking, to keep up with the latest ideas. But the good point Paul made before is that the technology isn't cheap enough yet for you to offer that to a client without a major increase in your rates. And I mentioned in my talk that LCI UK is currently running a series of CPD events. 350, 400 architects are coming to CPD events across England. And I'm told by David Adamson, who's running them for us, I'm talking at some of them as well, he tells me that a vast number of architects are almost single practices, single individuals, or just a few people. There's only about 20 or so percent of the big Norman Fosters, I guess, into architecture. So for them to do it, it must be almost impossible, I would think, unless they come up with a very simple app. And it's particularly appropriate for me at the moment, because I'm buying a house, I'm selling I'm buying another house. I'm going through the whole thing, building surveys, I've got an architect employed, and he's used AutoCAD. Within a week, less than a week, he turned around our first scheme design using our RIBA standard. So if he moved to BIM, that'd be fascinating. If you got a really cheap iPhone type app you can do it on, it'd be brilliant. You'd be using it all over. That might be the answer. Does that help? Does that answer your question? Yeah. A good question though. Spot on question. Okay.
Thank you very much, Derek. So time is ticking. Let's move on to the next question. So not many left. Okay. What do you think is the main driver for level 2 BIM implementation in the highway sector? Okay, thank you. Governmental impetus on vision.
That's already the question.
Okay, now let's vote now. So option A is development of value-adding technology to create competitive edge. And option B is increasing amount of trained workforce for BIM and related technologies. Option C is governmental impetus and visions. D, present evidence showing that BIM and related technologies can add value. And option E, emerging industry standards and classifications. And F, market drive for BIM level 2. So governmental impetus and vision. Good. Any comments? No. Okay, because the time is ticking, can we do voting again for the next question? This is now for heritage. So can we do voting again for heritage sector? So what do you think is the main driver for level 2 BIM for heritage sector? Okay, I think everyone's voted now. Yeah. So in either occasion, so option C see governmental impetus and vision came to height. So for heritage, so what was the example?
So I think, yeah, it was similar represent for the highways as well.
That suggests some of the discussion has been there's less evidence for heritage than there is for highways.
Sorry?
There's less evidence at the moment for heritage than there is for highways. So the key is more important in heritage because we don't have the evidence base. In highways, the government vision has already been set by the evidence that's already been given. In highways, the government vision has already been set by the evidence that's already been given to them that persuaded them to start the process. That isn't there for heritage.
Yeah, I think it depends on which country as well. So I think in the US, especially not in the building industry, especially but heritage itself is very important in digitalization. So they have seen the value that they're pushing this. Autodesk themselves have the USS Arizona in Hawaii. They've digitalized this, for example, because there is a huge value in making stuff visible to people which have not been possible if you see it worldwide. So I think it's coming to Europe for sure.
Okay, so we would like to finish in 5 minutes this session before we go to coffee break. So we are going to do 2 by 2, for the remaining question. So can we vote again, please? Now, what will the most value-adding technology integrated with BIM level 2 for the highway industry? So, by looking at these options, option A about data collection and sharing methods and sensors and actuators networks, or option B, data manipulation capabilities, parallel computing, increasing process powers, and option C, data analytics, big data, data mining, and option D is data presentation, mobile and wearable computing devices, cloud applications, and option E is all of the above will bring significant capabilities to BIM level 2 implementation for highway sector in integration with BIM. Yeah, let's vote, please. I think done. Sorry.
I'm not sure where on that list you would put things like machine control, the transfer of data between design and construction, contractors, and the supply chain for integrated machine control, and which I think is where there's a huge benefit in the highway industry.
So which, I can't see clearly from the
My question is, where on those lists, I don't see a thing like machine control. Maybe it's even in section A, but I'm not sure.
I think it's in section B.
I think it's in the telemetry GIS.
Hello, I think it's in question A. It's telemetry and GPS GIS, automatic machine control, and earthworks, etc. I think you mean, yeah, telemetry and GPS GIS. It's A.
Thank you, Olga. Okay, let's vote now. Okay, it's easy answer. So all of the above. No need to think too much. Okay, let's do the same question, please. I'm voting for heritage now, please. Yeah. Okay, can we please vote now? The same question. So, what sort of technology should be integrated or used in integration with BIM for heritage sector, and that will add the most value? Voted? Okay. Yeah. I believe it's G. Thank you. Again, interesting. So this time A is also, second most selected option, which is, I think, different than the highway, is it? Yes. So if you go.
I'm quite pleased to see that, because I actually I pressed A myself rather than the easy option E. If you put to one side all of the discussions, arguments, call it what you want about, the relevance of BIM within heritage. I'm a surveyor. We use survey data to provide the basis for BIM development. And the survey world is full of sort of technological developments. One of the things that is starting to come in is mobile mapping. Yes. We're seeing it a lot for urban mapping. The use of the likes of the Google streetcars or the developments of them now to actually map urban environments on the fly. We're now seeing that within buildings, and there's two systems currently out there that you can apply. One of them is £125,000. It's probably not the one for the heritage sector, but there's another one which is about £15,000–20,000, which will actually map a building as you walk around it, and it'll actually process it pretty much straight away. Those sort of tools will actually give us the basis for generating sort of BIM data a lot quicker than the other tools, the static laser scanners, the static photogrammetry that we're seeing at the moment. The other thing is that BIM data sets, if you throw in all the laser scanning in 3D, which I think you need behind it to actually gain the detail, they're big, these data sets. Some of them are enormous, and they're quite difficult to deal with, and I think that's where cloud computing starts to come in. We're using ArcGIS in the cloud within Historic England, which enables us to access lots and lots of data sets very, very quickly. I think this is something that the likes of Autodesk Bentley are probably working on as we speak, to make the tools more accessible without having to worry too much about the data size. There's the security aspect, but I can't answer that one for you.
Thank you, Paul.
Hi, actually I'm Phil Nightingale from Medical Systems here, so very great day, and thank you for all the presentation material. Yes, we do that with things like ProjectWise, or we stream the point clouds on demand, and we also do things like the content capture for photogrammetry, so some really good technologies to look at and help with this challenging situation.
Thank you. Okay, let's move to the. Okay, I think that's the final question. Is that the final question, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the final question. Okay, so achieving BIM level 2 maturity within highway sector will contribute to one of the options, or some of the options, or all of the options. Can you please now vote the right option you think? Increased transparency and cooperation and data sharing, unification, moving towards collaborative and integrated project deliveries, data-driven decision making, increased automation, and better command of life cycle, data for professionals, and all of the above. Okay, let's see the answers. Okay, then an easy answer. It's better to actually choose the most.
Request a revote.
I think that's not right, yeah. Recorded the transition. So can you just reset? Oh, that's the one, is it? Yeah. Okay. Yep. So, which one is so? Okay, 31% established, all of the above, and now option C, towards more collaborative integrated project delivery systems from a commercial point of view. Okay, let's repeat the question again for the heritage. I think that's something. That's right. Yeah. Just okay, now it's ready. Can we vote again, please? The same question for the heritage sector. Increase transparency and cooperation in data sharing, and unification of the asset life cycle. In option C, moving towards more collaborative and integrated project delivery systems. And option D is data-driven decision making. Option E is increased automation of some non-value-adding activities. Yeah. And F, better command of the life cycle data for professionals. And G, let's put the G out of the options here. Okay, let's vote, please. Yes. Okay. So it is quite different spread it over the options. So many things have better command of lifecycle data for professionals. And second most is increased automation of some non-value-adding activities for professionals in terms of technology and process improvement. Okay, any comments from the stage or from the floor? Seems everyone is tired already. I can see the face. Let's finish now. Okay. Yeah.
So before we set out for coffee, Phil, would you like to tell the audience about the workshop you are doing with the Academy? Because
yeah, sure.
Of them are
Yeah, so after the conference, what we're trying to do is just to have maybe an exchange. So I'm actually working for Autodesk Education, so I'm really interested in collaborating more with academia and also with research. So whoever from academia and also industry professionals maybe who are interested in working together with research with universities maybe can stay afterwards after the general sessions.
So we'll do actually do a presentation in 10 minutes after the break. Yeah. And following the break, we will do. So Phil will do a presentation after the coffee break, and then we will conclude the workshop. But after the workshop, Phil is available to do a BIM academic forum. So to actually seek any potential collaboration with academia and industry. Okay, so can we have a 10 minutes coffee break?
Now, I want to introduce our last speaker, Philip Müller from Autodesk. He traveled from Germany yesterday, and education program.
Hello everybody. Thanks very much, Dr. Assis, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here. The first time in Manchester, and I'm coming from the education field. We do definitely recognize the role of the UK in pushing the BIM. So in my speech today, or in my presentation, I just want to talk about what are points which maybe come also beyond BIM or after BIM, because I think there's lots of interesting approaches which are happening. That's a quote from Jack Welch. He said that if the rate of exchange exceeds on the outside and the rate of exchange on the inside, the end is near. So what that actually says is, you know, or what I think it kind of relates to is lifelong learning, and also how to maybe push the boundaries in lots of things. So if you have new technology, would you know, if you're looking or interested in looking at it, or would you just wait until, you know, it comes to become mandatory or it changes? So in software, it's also the question, you know, if that software will be successful or not. But, you know, just pitching this as an idea, basically. So why did I put this quote, basically? So what we're seeing right now is that we have a drastic change right now. We're talking from an eruption where everything is moving towards digitalizing. So Dr. Aziz just mentioned before, we're talking about an augmented area. I think there is, before that, or between digitalization and augmented area, there is also the connected area. So it needs to be, everything needs to be connected in order to be augmented. Because if it's just, you know, a sensor somewhere, it doesn't help. So, as I said, like 52 tablet PCs%. It's a rapidly growing number. The computing costs are declining. So what we are looking at, or what Autodesk is looking into as well, is not just, you know, how to store data on the cloud, but also to think about infinite computing. So remember those days, or my studies are a couple of years ago, but I'm an architect by education. I did 3ds Max renderings. That took quite a while, or renderings in Revit. So, but now with cloud technology, you can use infinite computing and you can have your rendering high resolution within 1 minute or whatever. We're in one project with Mercedes-Benz, who are real-time visualization for the cars, basically. The costs for this renderings are extremely high, but it makes a benefit for them because in order to make decisions, they can really fastly make decisions, and then they save money, and that is the decision-making point for them. So the area of connection. This is a project, I'm not sure if anybody attended Autodesk University in Las Vegas last year. Carl Bass presented this, and this is a car, and I'm going to get the pitch afterwards to him. This car is from the Benditos brothers. So the Benditos brothers, if some of you know them, they're crazy bunch. They do stunts, they jump over bridges, really dangerous stuff. And they were coming to Autodesk and asking basically, you know, how to create a car which is more safer and, you know, has more power. Well, how can we have a more efficient car or a better one to our needs? And I think the research team took this on. They were putting lots of sensors in the car, what they had at the moment. With that measurement, they went into a software which we are having in research right now, which is called Autodesk Within. It's a software for computation algorithms. So based upon the data which came in during the drives and everything, we put the data basically in the software, and the software computed a frame, a non-standard frame for that particular case. So I think it's about 20% more lightweight, and I think it has more securities and everything, which fulfills the needs basically. And this is, I think, you know, one direction where it comes to get is the area of connectedness, not just connectedness about devices, not just connectedness between human and the internet and stuff, but it's also the connectedness between different softwares. And as I said, I'm getting the pitch to BIM, what that means. So this is also a research project which we are working right now. This is in the Netherlands. The company is called MH3D. What we did there, basically, or what their idea was that they wanted to create a new structure which is basically not done by a human. And not done by a human means also the design. So what actually, the only thing which has been put into that software was the loads and everything which that structure needs to hold, and everything else has been computed. And then the robots themselves are assembling that bridge. This is a pedestrian bridge, for sure. This is not a car bridge right now, but it kind of illustrates, a potential which is there. We've been talking and having the polls about, what you're expecting in 5 to 10 years and onwards. So this is happening at the moment right now. This is today. I'm not saying that everything is going to be working like this within the next 3 years, but it's already happening. There is proof of concept that's in the air, 3D printing with steel actually. So this is a video of InfraWorks from a project from AECOM. What they did is they combined their designs together with 3D laser scans. And what's really interesting is that one point which also has been made in the conference very clear is the amount of data. So one thing is to capture all the data there is, but the second one is how to store this and how to work with that data. And InfraWorks is a solution on our end which we have, which is by definition a large model viewer. So there have been some tests made on how much data they can put into that software, and they haven't managed to bring the software down so far. So I'm not sure if that's the solution to everything right now, but I think it's going to be possible to have really detailed objects, from infrastructure to architecture to you name it basically, heritage within one single model. And you can also take off quantities, schedule everything, see how everything worked back in the days. This is then a simulation. So as soon as you have 3D data, and I think this is the biggest potential, which also sometimes is underestimated, is the whole simulation part of it. So one is, yes, you can take off quantities, yes, you can make clash detection, yes, you can make this, but you can also simulate, like thermal analysis, you can make pedestrian analysis, you can make car analysis, like everything you can basically imagine you can do with that software, which haven't been able in 2D. And it's also a question of information again. So now I'm also going in a little bit into the argumented age. So this is also from InfraWorks. We kind of have the argumented buildings over the real world, where you can see basically, or alternate some of the different so as it says, it all kind of comes together in this connectedness. You have mobile assets, you have sensors, you have gears, you have public stakeholders. Basically everybody can potentially have access to information. So this is also a little bit illustrative. But I also want to a little bit open up what's happening also at the moment in Germany. Germany has publicly announced a mandate to go towards BIM in infrastructure, money-wise. So it's not in the building industry. The reason for this is because the minister is from the highway industry, so that's easier to make a mandate then. What's interesting about that approach is the #1 company which stays under the infrastructure is the Deutsche Bahn, which the Deutsche Bahn is also holds the how should I say this, 10% of the total buildings in Germany. So when you're saying, okay, the Germany infrastructure is going to BIM, everything is basically going to BIM, but it's more standardized and it's more easier when you have one entity staying behind it. This is actually the Deutsche Bahn already has released the paper to this on how to proceed with BIM. A really interesting one. Must have been.
Is there English version of this?
I'm not sure if it's at the moment in English. I'm pretty sure it's going to be released in English. So the Deutsche Bahn and everything is really willing and also to share the knowledge with. There is a project right now which is also happening in Germany on the TU Munich right now, which I think goes also into the direction of data and also into open source. So I'm not sure how many people of you know Dynamo, for example. Does anybody know Dynamo? Yeah. So perfect. So Dynamo is an open source software based upon Revit. And the good thing is Dynamo becomes more and more an exchange between the Autodesk ecosystem. So you can create your own workflows and then you can share them publicly. And this is a project at TU Munich for infrastructure where they created basically a database of bridges, because bridges are very highly standardized. And then you can run different alternatives within Dynamo, and for quantities and everything you can bring it to Revit. And I think this kind of illustrates that I think that the open source idea and also to share knowledge and to share best practices in BIM is, I think, a really important one, which is, I think, also crucial in order to make BIM successful. One of my last slides, I think, is Forge. So Forge is a platform which we have developed for cloud computing. So if there's anybody interested in working on our cloud solutions, it's very welcome to do this. All of the code is open source as well. So for sure it's our software, but the code where it can work on is open source. The data which is in the cloud is mostly Java, so you can also combine most of the Java scripts together with your 3D model, for example. I can also look if I have an example here to kind of illustrate this. So this is, for example, on the Forge platform. As you see, Autodesk itself is really much moving into the cloud because it makes stuff way more easier to store, to compute and everything, and also to give people access. This here is a 3D model. You can rotate it and let's see. So okay, the mouse pad here is a little bit off. But what I can do as well here is I can say, okay, I select an element and I have all the information attached to this element. So the one thing would be to have a just 3D view of an element, but what that actually is a full BIM model in the cloud. And you can share this publicly with everybody. And this also ties into InfraWorks and all the other cloud platforms which we have. Alright, so this would be a little bit on my end. What we're working at the moment right now is cloud technology and giving people access to this. I think after the conclusion we will have the possibility for a small academic forum where I can also ask some more questions if anybody's interested in working closer together with us and our solutions. All right.
Thanks, Phil. We have some time for questions for Phil. We move to our conclusion session. I have in this case one question. You must refer to simulation Yeah, I was basically asking about the simulation, which was very impressive. Yeah, I just want to know a little bit more about the purpose of that simulation and how.
So that simulation, I think it's Yes? Yeah. Awesome. So the simulation part is sort of pedestrian simulation is part of it. We have a flood simulation, which is right now beta status, and there is more coming. So we're trying to have a solid platform where you can simulate stuff. And plus, we have this APIs on most of our hero products, where you can also dive into and create your own simulations. So, for example, with Dynamo, one part which has been really used extensively is code checking, code compliance, and those kinds of things. So those kind of simulations as well, or visual simulations.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. Obviously, you are creating more and more data with additional BIM capabilities, simulation, 6D, 4D, BIM, etc. Do you have any kind of projects or systems in place that you use to do some data analytics on those vast amount of data that you create? Any kind of data mining or data analytics? I'll try to link this thing to this BIM level 3 thing, you know, big data and data analytics. So I would like to learn your views or plans for the future in terms of that data analytics bits.
So I think data is a very large topic, so I think we have to be more precise on which data we mean. Because, so project life cycle data is still in process. So we have simulation software, but it's not, you cannot see the workflows which are there, open source, and you cannot modify them for now. But what is interesting in terms of level 3 is, and that's a very interesting example, so Austria has released level 3 standard already. So it's, I think, one of the first countries in Europe which has definitely done this. And they have created a property server. So in terms of data, the idea is that people, like manufacturers, post all the information on this property server. This gets attached to geometry, and then you can load this into it. This is like a large documentation where you can have, like, from a table to a stool to everything basically in there. And the funny thing is, it translates into every language. So there's a unified ID to that element, and this ID means, for example, stool, means stool in German, means whatever in every different language. So you can, this structure itself gives the flexibility to really adapt it in every country to every standard. And that's, I think, an amazing approach, which data-wise is, I think, nice.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Coming here all the way from Germany. I think hopefully we can actually build up some collaboration, some work together, and then we can take it from there. Then we don't leave it just here. So so now this is actually the end of our workshop. But rather than us making the conclusion, I would like to have some, in a way, some comments, some feedback, some evaluation of the day. So I'd like to ask some colleagues, who could actually do an observation. How was the day? Was it useful? What was the key outcomes? What was the key learnings from the day? Can we start with Nigel? Yeah. Can we start with Nigel? Nigel is from California. He's here doing research for Highways England. And we go for Lemmy and then John Council.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so I was asked to talk about BIM from the United States perspective. And I'm not really a specialist in BIM at all. I'm more interested in Lean. But it seems that Lean and BIM are so closely aligned. People are talking about the two together. I'm not sure they always belong together. Yeah, that's we hear a lot about Lean and BIM. But I think that the real takeaway for me from today, and I've come here to work with Highways England because I think my interest is in Lean in highway agencies, and I think that Highways England probably is the leader in this area. There are several states in the United States that have adopted Lean. I don't think they're anywhere as far along as Highways England is. But the key takeaway for me on BIM was the point that I think came through several times, that adoption of BIM technology seems to be driven by the client, by the customer, more than by the construction industry. Primarily because the contractors are in a competitive environment. And if one contractor can adopt BIM, someone else can adopt BIM, they don't get any competitive advantage. The advantage is to the customer. In the highways area, particularly in the transfer of data from design to construction out into the field, We touched on it very briefly, but didn't talk much about the transfer of data to machine control, where this design information can be transferred in good format to the contractor, and the contractor can use it to actually control their machine. So graders and bulldozers and pavers are controlled with the BIM data. So it's no longer a case of the surveying, going out and laying out pegs. We call them pins here. And doing the location, but actually using the BIM data to transfer to the user. Also, Derek talked about Southern Health, which is a major healthcare company in Northern California. But it's not just Southern Health, it's all the health industry in the United States, in California. California passed a law a few years ago that required that every hospital must be able to withstand the worst credible disaster. So it's really meant that every hospital in the entire state is going to be replaced. So there's a huge business of replacing hospitals. So there's one is a big producer, but every other hospital is being replaced. And because of the state of the technology, BIM is being used very largely in that, and particularly some of the observations I've observed in the field is going out and doing point clouds at every stage of the construction so that you can know the exact location of all the utilities. Hospitals have a lot of utilities in them, all the Ethernet and all the communication devices, and pipes and ducts. I don't know, I'm not a medical person. And those technologies will become redundant and will need to be replaced. So that for the future maintenance, they know exactly where all the utilities are, where all the pipes are, where all the cables are, with the goal of being able to take rooms out of service for the shortest possible time, so they can plan in the future when they have to replace the infrastructure. They can take a room out of service, remove the drywall, the board around the room, and replace the utilities as quickly as possible because they know where everything is and they can plan it better. So I think that there's a hoped for large benefit in the future in the maintenance and the upgrading of the facility, because we know that all the technology will become redundant very quickly. So those are some illustrations out of the US. It's been a very interesting conversation.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you, Nigel.